to making thinking visible for students. I'm super excited tonight to have Julie Holland. She is a instructional coach and has been for 6 years in St. Louis public school system. She's also taught high school English for 16 years. So I cannot wait to hear what she has to share with us tonight. Before we get started, I do want to let you know that the chat box is down on the right-hand side. So if you want to ask a question or comment or participate in the webinar today, please use that chat box in order to communicate. There will also be a quick survey at the end, just so we can keep improving and offering the things that you want to know more about in your school systems. And I see Christy wants to know more critical thinking strategies, and she is in the right place tonight. So I won't take any more of your time today, and I'll go ahead and turn everything over to Julie. Julie, we are ready to hear about making thinking visible.
Great, thank you, and welcome everyone. If we want to go ahead and take a moment, I see some people going ahead and signing in, and while we do that, as you sign in, just while we wait, if you can tell us maybe where you are, what grade you teach, or why you chose tonight's seminar, webinar. I am Julie Holland. I'm coming to you from Festus, Missouri, which is just a little bit south of St. Louis, where we had our first snowfall of the season last night, and lovely temperatures in the teens today. So we're staying nice and toasty now inside. Welcome to everybody. And let's go ahead and get started. So the foundation for our work tonight is the Making Thinking Visible book. Not only does this book provide great research behind the thinking, but also detailed step-by-step routines and examples of those routines being implemented in classrooms for various ages. Our objective for tonight is to help you develop a better understanding of what that means to make thinking visible, and hopefully give you something to implement some core thinking routines into your elementary social studies learning block, or really any learning block. So let's think first about why making thinking visible is so important. As our author says, when we make thinking visible, we get not only a window into what students understand, but also how they're understanding it. So once we recognize the students' insights, as well as any misconceptions they might be having, then we can use that knowledge to engage and support them. So in some ways, I would compare this to the information maybe that you can glean from a multiple choice test versus an essay. Think about how much more you know about your students and what they've understood when they get to share that thinking in a written piece for you. You know, in so many of our mission statements in our schools, we often think that one of our ultimate objectives is to help students become what we call lifelong learners. Well, then, if we're going to do that, then an integral part of that process is teaching them how to think to learn. So when we help students learn to think with an idea, not just knowing the information, not just thinking about a topic, but when we help them think with an idea or apply it to something more than just the topic that they're currently studying, we're actually helping them answer for themselves that old question, why is this important to me? So let's look at an example of the difference that pushing to think with ideas can make for our learners. Let's look at an example in the elementary layers. So if we ask students just to know a topic, we might ask them to complete a task such as this first one: place the events of the Lewis and Clark expedition in the correct order on a timeline. So most of us would agree that that might be a good starting point, but it doesn't really require students to do any higher order thinking. So we might push them to use the knowledge that they've gained to, maybe evaluate whether the expedition was a success. So now we can see that students are doing some higher order thinking, and they're using evidence and details to support a claim. But we still haven't made this challenging learning relevant to them. But when we can get down to this last layer, thinking with the ideas, we can get students thinking beyond not just historical events are coming alive and helping them grapple with their world that they live in, so they can learn from that past and apply it then to their present or their future. So thinking with ideas, if we want to get to that point with our students, that requires this paradigm shift on the part of the teacher. We've got to stop. That paradigm shift is not trying to transmit what's in our heads, but trying to get what's in their heads into our heads, so then we can provide that responsive instruction. So first of all, that challenge of making thinking visible is creating those authentic opportunities for that thinking to occur. When students perceive that we as the teacher think we already have the right answer, then they answer in hopes of winning the game of guess what's in the teacher's head. Well, we've all done it. And unfortunately, we often claim to be asking open-ended questions, but the reality is that our questions often are limiting. So we have to give our students learning environments in which we're asking questions, we're listening, and we're capturing their student ideas without expecting just one right answer. So let's look more closely at these 3 teacher shifts or moves that create spaces for making thinking visible. First, we think about strong questioning. Questioning that models an interest in ideas, that helps construct understanding, and that helps facilitate and clarify thinking. So if we create essential questions, we ask authentic questions that have no predetermined answers. During inquiries, we can ask questions that allow students to connect or extend ideas and make interpretations. And we can finally continue to dig deeper with those clarifying questions, such as, what makes you think that? When we listen, we want to be a listener and teach our students to become listeners, because their academic success depends on it. And finally, in our classrooms, we want to be publicly documenting for our young learners, for our older learners, using observations, records, anchor charts, anything we can to help them capture their thinking, because that signifies to them that we're truly listening and that what they have to say is valuable. So let's break down how questioning just quickly applies to the C3 framework. If you've been spending time getting familiar with the C3 framework, questioning is an integral part of that. We're getting away from that sit and get towards inquiry models of learning and opportunities for teachers and students to ask questions. So in dimension 1, which is where the heart of the questioning lives, students continue to think critically and ask questions throughout the arc, and they consider a topic through different lenses in dimension 2. Then they determine the credibility of sources in dimension 3. And even in dimension 4, they continue constantly asking and answering questions, even as they collaborate and critique final conclusions that they might come up with as they take informed action in dimension 4. So over the next few slides, we're going to look at just a handful of some strategic thinking routines that are easy to implement in elementary. They're broken down in the book and on the great website that I'll show you at the end. Some of these you've probably already been implementing, and you can implement them at any time during lessons. It's really up to you as the professional in your classroom to think about which thinking routine helps you and your students in the moment. So this first one is the Think, Puzzle, Explore questioning routine, thinking routine that helps, again, model interest in ideas. It's very similar to something that a lot of us have used, which is the KWL, or know, and what I want to learn and what I did learn. So in that first column, we'd let our students think about what they think they know about a piece that we're presenting, a topic, a subject. Then in that middle column, puzzling, what questions or puzzles do you have? Where they get to generate their questions or puzzles they have about this particular topic. And finally, in that last column of this chart, they get to explore. And this is where it's different from what they've learned. In this column, they're thinking about how they might explore the questions. So this is taking place prior to new learning. It gets them thinking about how they would research to find answers to their questions. That's really going to help create those independent thinkers. They're not waiting for the teacher to do the thinking or give them the just right info. They're generating ideas about how they would explore their questions. Let's look at another way to show interest in ideas. I love this. This is a great one. These are question starts. Students are asked to first just develop 12 questions about a topic or concept, and they can use the question starts that you see on the right. Once they've developed those question starts, then they go through and they star the questions that seem interesting, select one or more to discuss for a few moments, and then at the end they have an opportunity to reflect. I think this is a great one for our older elementary students to do independently or in small groups. I think it also works beautifully as an anchor chart with our younger kids as whole group thinking. So from a first grade social studies unit, we might use some of those question starts to think about rules and communities. Why are rules and laws important to our community? How would it be different if we didn't have them? Suppose that only one person made all the laws. So you can see how our younger kids could easily generate 12 questions, probably double that with support from the teacher and those question starts. Here's a thinking routine that helps questioning that helps construct understanding. So again, this is something we want to, it helps us check for student understanding, helps them express their understanding in a different way. And this is called CSI. In CSI stands for color, symbol, and image. And you can see here that this is an example from Rochester Community Schools that I found that I thought was a great example for us. This routine is going to appeal to those visual learners. In the example, the teachers modify the routine somewhat, and again, you need to feel free to make those modifications because again, it's about getting the kind of thinking you want from your students. So you can see here that these students have studied the American Revolutionary War, thinking about how African Americans might have felt after the war. The student chose the color and here has given an explanation as to why they chose the color. They created their symbol. The one thing this is lacking is that image, but that's okay. Again, it's up to you to decide what you need to see from your students' thinking. Questioning that clarifies thinking can be so simple as just asking those extending questions. What makes you think that? Not every thinking routine is very complicated. A lot of us have probably extended their thinking in such ways, but this is such a powerful question. Giving students the opportunity to explain their thinking is the window of opportunity that we need to fully grasp their understanding and or again their misconceptions, and for students then to practice supporting their ideas with those details, examples, and evidence. So whether they're doing this as a written piece or orally, a great way to get into their minds. When we think about being a listener, whether we're being the listener or we're teaching students to be the listeners, listening is not merely not talking. It means we're taking a vigorous human interest in what it is that's being told us. So whether we're listening in to their turn and talks, their think, pair, shares, or listening just without judging when students share their thoughts and opinions, really being in the moment and listening is going to promote that visible thinking within the classroom. Again, some routines teach students to become better listeners, such as, again, the think, pair, share. I think probably most elementary teachers have done this multiple times, whether it's in ELA, social studies, math, giving students a moment to think about a question you've posed, turning and talking to one partner so that everybody's voice is heard by someone, and then finally calling on a few students to share out. Again, when do these listening moments occur? Anytime and all the time during our lessons and during our days. So this "when I used to think" example is used for reflection after students have read news sources about a topic. The emphasis again is really not on whether they're getting an answer right, but on listening to see how students are gaining insight. So they begin with the "I used to think," we read, and then "but now I know," or "now I think," based on what new information that they've been given in a lesson. So that third step of really making thinking visible, we talked about questioning, ideas, examples of how we can build questioning. We talked about being great listeners, and finally documenting. And documenting, again, whether that's whole group documenting or independent documenting, whether it's the students documenting or you documenting, it again signals to them that their ideas have value. In our K through 2 settings, those whole group anchor charts often work best for capturing all that deep thinking that they have that they can't necessarily write just yet. And then in our 3rd through 5th grades, those whole group, small group discussions and independent thinking moments or opportunities for us to capture their thinking. So how you'll use it is going to drive your instruction throughout an inquiry topic. So we want to make sure that we really take time to capture their thinking. Here's an example. On the right, you'll see the original setup for the 3-2-1 bridge of this thinking routine. And in the original example on the right, students would have 3 thoughts or ideas about a topic, their initial responses to it, 2 questions, and an analogy. And then after doing some inquiry, they would go back to it, have record their 3 thoughts or ideas, their 2 questions, and their 1 analogy. And then the bridge happens down at the bottom, where you can see how students then explain how their new responses connect to their initial responses. If you look at the anchor chart on the left, you can see how this has been adapted, again, more as a whole group activity for some younger kids. This is from an elementary school in Australia, and you can see they've been studying Anzac Day, which is kind of like our Veterans Day, Memorial Day. And so they don't have just 3 thoughts. They've pulled from the students, and they've created a whole group anchor chart with words that they found, questions that they had, a simile or metaphor. And you'll see they filled out the first side, their initial responses, and now they'll come back as a group and tie all their thoughts together. Here are 2 other examples of documenting. And the bottom one's a little hard to see. Both of these are the See, Think, Wonder thinking routine. It's an easy but effective way to document, again, their initial analysis of a source, especially if it's a photograph or a work of art. So you'll see that these two examples, the teachers have again taken some liberties with the model to see the thinking that they wanted to see. So the first one has a very traditional look to it. We have the C column, where in this particular case, the students were going to look at see things in an animation. In the middle column, they're going to think about what they think might happen next, or why do you think it might have happened? And then in the final column, what that makes them wonder. In the example at the bottom, you can see that the teacher has made this a bigger activity, placing that photograph in the center of a larger document and creating sections around it for the students to capture what they see, what they think, and what they wonder. And then I love that this teacher also decided to create a connect area for those students. I can see this as a large chart in the middle of a small group where all those kids are brainstorming together. So as always, whole group, small group, individual, depending on the age level and the purpose for their thinking. So whether we think they are or not, we know that our students are watching and listening to our moves. And one of the most basic modes of learning is watching a model. From babies waving bye-bye or tying shoes or learning to swing a bat, we all rely on models. So since thinking is generally something that is unseen, think of the enormous gift we can give students when they see and hear our thinking processes. Think aloud and expressing genuine curiosity towards the subjects sends a signal that thinking is a habit of mind. Our students need to see their teachers as thinkers. We need to show them we're excited about learning. So that was a really quick overview, giving you just a few insights on some of the many thinking routines that are out there. As we wrap up our webinar, let's just take a time to reflect on how we might be able to impact our student learning by making thinking visible. If there's a new routine you saw that you might like to try, and if you'd like to respond in the chat feature, I'd love to see what you're thinking right now.
That was a wonderful job, Julie. I am amazed at all the different resources, and I've written down several things that I want to try with my students. And while everyone is responding, I just wanted to make sure that I thank you for your time today. And wow, I'm just super excited. The color symbol image, I work with kindergartners, so that is definitely something that I see that they could use more, explaining orally their reasoning. But I think it would be a neat thing because they absolutely can relate to color and feelings, and we're actually talking about that. So that was the one I starred next to.
Absolutely, and just giving our younger learners an opportunity to express themselves in ways that sometimes we struggle with our writing and getting the depth of our thinking on the paper. Isn't it wonderful when we have other ways to express our thinking? I did want to make sure that everybody has a chance to sing.
Yes. Marie Barrett asked, is there any way for me to watch a video on this? Do you have any video resources from your research for this topic that you were able to find? The other thing that I can tell you, Marie, is that we will definitely record this and it will be posted so you can have the PowerPoint that way. But I'm sure that I can get it to you if you, yes, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So great question. There are some videos, but I went ahead and shared this resource slide with you because the first one, visiblethinkingpz.org, does a great job of explaining in depth not only these thinking routines, but so many more, especially some for our older students. And it breaks down how you might use it, the action steps, how you might introduce them to your students. Great routines there. It also breaks them down into why you might be using them. Thinking routines for creativity or thinking routines for understanding. Of course, the book is fantastic. And finally, that last resource from Rochester Community Schools, even though that's think from the middle, this is a middle school, they give great student examples of how they've used these pieces. And again, they're easily adaptable for our elementary students. That's what's so beautiful about these thinking routines.
Wonderful. Let me check and see, make sure we got all the comments. Well, great. Are there any more comments today? Well, thank you everyone once again for coming out on this very cold evening. At least it is in our area. I don't know if any areas in the country have warmed up yet, but thank you so much again, Julie, for sharing this information with us. And it's so important, especially in our student-centered environment and making students value and appreciate their learning. What you say is very important. So thank you again to everyone, and I appreciate it. There will be a questionnaire, as I said, at the end, so I hope that you have time to fill that out. So we do have one more comment from Marie. I want to make sure. Yeah, and I definitely agree, Christy Brown. That was a lot of fast information, but a lot of great information. And luckily, as I said, this session is recorded, so you will be able to watch it later. Marie is watching this. She has a big ESOL population and a new curriculum. So she wants to use it with Think Aloud. The Think Aloud, she doesn't think are enough. So I think you got a lot of other ideas here tonight. So Shanda loves the Think Puzzle Explore. That was nice too. I love the use of the word puzzle in that section to make it just different. And then also the Explorer rather than KWL sort of idea. Maria loved the color use writing.
Yes. And so, again,
excellent feedback. Thank you, everyone.
I encourage everybody to dig into these resources with visible thinking. They are great. We can give our students so many different opportunities to show their thinking. And again, everybody, thank you for joining me, and have a warm and wonderful rest of your evening.
Right, thank you. I'll go ahead and close the session now, or stop the recording first, and then I will close it so you'll get your.
Right.